Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping right into something pretty big, global government debt.
Yeah, it's everywhere in the news.
Exactly. And it feels complicated, lots of big numbers. But our mission here is to, unpack why it's so high and what it might actually mean for you.
Okay, let's dive in.
So first off, the sheer scale is, well, it's kind of mind-boggling, isn't it?
It really is. The article points out that public debt in developed countries is as high as it was right after World War II.
Wow.
Yeah. Think about that context, and you see huge amounts in places like the U.S., Japan, France, even China.
And that U.S. example really hits home. The interest payments alone, what was it, $880 billion last year?
That's right. More than military spending, and it's getting close to healthcare costs.
That's huge. And globally, the average debt-to-GDP ratio is sitting around or even above 100%.
Mm-hmm. And maybe the most worrying part the article highlights is that there isn't really a clear plan, a path forward to bring these numbers down.
So how did we get here? What drove all this borrowing?
Well, the article connects it to a few major global shocks. You had the 2008 financial crisis, for one.
Right.
Then, obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic triggered massive government spending everywhere.
Yeah, stimulus checks, business support, all that.
Exactly. And layered on top of that, the war in Ukraine and the energy crisis, it all adds up. Governments stepped in to cushion the blow.
And for a long time, interest rates were super low, weren't they?
That's a key point the article makes. It fostered this environment where borrowing seemed, cheap. Almost painless. It became a habit, maybe.
Like free money, almost. But now things are different.
Precisely. Now we have inflation, and central banks are raising interest rates to combat it.
Which means servicing that huge pile of existing debt suddenly gets way more expensive.
Exactly. And that brings us to the real crunch question for you listening. How does this affect your life?
Yeah. What's the impact on, regular people?
Well, the article suggests a few things. High government debt can potentially mean higher taxes in the future.
Nobody wants that.
Or the flip side could be cuts to public services, things we rely on. Think infrastructure, education.
Okay. And what about things like pensions or mortgages?
Yeah, those could be affected too. Pension funds might be under pressure, and higher government borrowing costs can definitely filter through to higher mortgage rates for homeowners.
The article mentions how quickly investor sentiment can shift.
Yeah.
Right, that UK example from 2022.
Oh, yeah. Liz Truss's plan. Unfunded tax cuts, basically.
And the market just panicked. Borrowing costs shot up almost overnight.
It's a real-world example of how fragile confidence can be when debt levels are already high. If investors get nervous, they might demand much higher interest rates or just stop lending.
That sounds pretty scary. The article even uses the phrase death spiral. What exactly is that?
It's a grim scenario. Imagine like a household having to borrow more money just to pay the interest on the loans they already have.
Huh?
For a country, if it gets to the point where it has to keep borrowing just to cover interest payments, especially if inflation is still high, it can, crush the economy.
And the alternative you mentioned, austerity cutting spending, that's not exactly popular either, is it?
No, definitely not. It can be politically toxic and might even slow down economic growth, making the debt problem worse in some ways. It's a really tough bind.
So are there any ways out? Does the article offer solutions?
It touches on a couple of possibilities, but they all have risks. One idea mentioned is governments could try printing more money or letting inflation run higher to sort of erode the real value of the debt.
But that sounds risky too. Doesn't that hurt savers? And damage trust in the currency?
Absolutely. That's the major downside highlighted. It can really punish people who've saved and undermine the stability of the whole financial system.
Okay, what else?
Well, the article also presents the argument for more strategic borrowing. The idea is if governments borrow smartly to invest in things that boost long-term growth.
Like what? Infrastructure. Education.
Exactly. Green energy, maybe. Things that could make the economy more productive down the road. The thinking is that this kind of investment could eventually generate enough growth to make the debt more manageable.
So it's about what you borrow for, Not just borrowing for, say, tax cuts or short-term political wins.
That seems to be the distinction the article draws, yes.
Yeah.
Borrowing for productive investment versus borrowing for consumption or short-term fixes.
Right. So wrapping this up, the core message I'm getting from the article is that the world seems kind of addicted to debt.
That sums it up pretty well. And there are no easy fixes on the horizon.
And as this period of, let's call it easy money, with low interest rates comes to an end.
It's likely that ordinary people, you listening, are going to feel the consequences one way or another. The choices governments make right now are critical.
Okay, that was our deep dive into global government debt. Really appreciate you joining us.
Glad to be here.
And just a final thought to leave you with. Considering everything we've discussed, the high debt, the rising rates, the potential impacts, what single economic indicator do you think will be the most important one to watch in the coming years? Something to mull over.